Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Jeff here. You're a pioneer. You really pioneered an entire new field, the voice over internet protocol. You co-founder of Vonage. Vonage changed the way communication is between people, really democratized accessibility of it. You've invested in over 400 startups. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's exciting to have you here, Jeff, and I'm looking forward to getting to your story.
I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. So, I read a little bit about you in terms of the radio stuff. You got really interested in amateur radio early on, and it seems to have inspired a lot of your career. What really drew you to that initially?
Loneliness, not
Mm-hmm.
being dependent upon people in order to find people. And in my case, it was growing up. And I think it was being in third grade, which is really is horrible unless it's nice to look away and say, gee, third grade was great, but not so much. And if you remember kids of a certain age, some of them are really not nice. And you can make a
Mm-hmm.
decision early on to tolerate them or not. And so I took the position, my life matters. And I'd rather not be influenced by people who either don't understand me or I will not conform to them. So I'd rather not have them as friends if that's who can be my friends. And so I looked for other ways. So, and by the way, loneliness, making the effort and asserting yourself to be alone is a superpower. It's not the same thing as saying I'm by myself. I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen. It's more like I chose to be alone. However, my father decided to introduce me to one of his brothers who, for his entire life, was an amateur radio operator. And when I discovered amateur radio, I discovered an entire community which would be part of my life forever. And it was the desire to communicate and the ways to connect with others, which is one of the secret DNAs to how you can become successful in this internet field. But for me, it was a desire to connect on my own terms. And so what I discovered with amateur radio was, for me, it was not just the cure for loneliness, but it was an opportunity to connect with souls from all over the world before and after school. So what happened during school just didn't matter. I was able to disintermediate, if you will, the elementary school experience and for really the high school, then middle school and high school for me, because I was able to deal with people all over the world when friends of mine were just staying in their own neighborhood. So I had this global approach to stuff, and the desire to connect just grew. And for me, there was a natural extension in my mind anyway from connecting with people on the radio, because when I grew up, the internet was still being conceived, even if it was being worked on in the 60s in the government. And when I got involved in internet communications, it was a hobby. And I was one of the few people that learned to take their hobby seriously. And so for me, the opportunity to cross connect two hobbies, communications on the internet with amateur radio, and the idea. So one of the things as a ham that you do naturally is, let's say you have a friend that lives in Boca, and you have a and I live, let's say, in Great Neck, and there are people that have family in both locations. There was a time growing up where there was something called a long distance phone call, where people who are hams would naturally say, "Hey, do you mind if you phone patch in my relatives on Long Island?" I'd say, "Sure," and we'd go on the radio, and while everyone could tune in and hear what you're saying, amateur radio by definition is not to be used for commercial purposes, but it can be used for social purposes. So it was natural for me to help a friend in Florida speak to relatives in New York City, or a friend in Tel Aviv talk to their relatives in the Bronx, or whatever it might be. And so when I got into the internet communications and started talking to people, and the thing about ham radio is when you say the letters C and Q together, it means seek you, meaning I'm seeking you. It's da 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 da, which is, by the way, for people that know music of the '60s, 70s, I should say, that's a disco beat. And there are a lot of musicians that are ham operators. But anyway, the outreach of CQ is where literally asking the world to come back to me. I'm not being specific who I want to talk to. I'm not saying somebody from Arizona, somebody from Tunisia. I'm just saying CQ, any random person. And on the internet, and you grow up, by the way, not wanting to being told don't talk to strangers, and on the internet we're told don't deal with strangers. But what I found myself is internet phone, or known as iPhone, which came out in 1995 from a company called Vocaltech, based in Herzliya in Israel. They were the first company in their category that absolutely got it right in terms of real-time communication on the internet. And I created a mailing list as a fan of the product. And about 6 months or so into my fandom, and hosting this mailing list, someone asked a question, is it possible to interconnect a telephone and a computer? And I simply dusted off my old phone patch from my radio days, connected it to
Uh-huh.
my computer, and it worked. And about a
Really?
month later, I launched this project, as I called it, Free World Dialup, because it was free. It connected the world, and it ran on dial-up, not broadband. And while there was no quality of service associated with it, meaning that it really did not sound so good, it worked. And it was a working prototype of how the future of voice on the internet would be. And I had a day job, and this was my night job, and I had a lot of fun being disruptive in a positive way, highlighting the future of how people would communicate while having fun at the same time. And so I was able to get hundreds of people to buy the right equipment. I gave them the software, and with the help of some folks who I never met in person, a gentleman in Tokyo, a gentleman in Indonesia, we were able to start this disruption. And for me personally, that became my life because I was working on Wall Street when this started. Free World Dialup launched in October, end of October '95. It was in March of '96. Randomly, 300 phone companies file a petition attacking the concept of speaking on the internet. They basically said that anyone who makes internet telephony software in America should be banned, and if it's not banned, then the makers of the software should be regulated like phone companies. And this was a joke, but
Oh my.
and people were asking what was I going to do about this. There's a mailing list called the iPhone mailing list, and I coined the term VON back in the day, back in '95, to stand for voice on the net and video on the net. And after about 10 days of people ranting about it, I decided, okay, let's create a coalition. So I got 110 companies from around the world to say, we're against this petition. And this was the first time in politics, in the internet politics in DC, at least from the communication sector, where somebody rose out of the ether. And the Voice on the Net Coalition, the Von Coalition, was born. It still exists today, and I was a founding chairman of it. I'm these days the chairman emeritus of it. And so I was able to provide direction, and ultimately, um, I was let go of Wall Street in July of '96, which saved my life. And in September 10th and 11th, '96, I hosted the very first conference in North America about the future of voice and video on the internet. In April of '97, that became the Von Conference, the Von Trade Show, which sort of provided the guiding light that helped revolutionize the telecommunications industry. And a lot of the $1.9 trillion market that's today called telecom has its roots in voice over IP. And free will dial-up evolved over time. It first started out connecting telephones to telephones, and at its peak, we were connecting devices to devices with no telephone needed. And that version of free will dial-up had over 1 million accounts distributed, and it got so big that the ITU issued a country code where we could just experiment. It was a lot of experimentation, and a version of FWD became the original footprint or a blueprint, if you will, for what became Vonage. And it also became the basis for regulatory policy because in 2003, I went to the US government and I petitioned them. I had a nightmare, a dream of the vision of the future that I'd come back in time to save the future. And effectively, what I had asked for was regulatory clarity that voice communication that originates on broadband should not be regulated as telecom. I was looking, if you will, to protect the future for future innovators who want to build things on broadband. But this is back in 2003, that they should be given the opportunity. And just because some people in Washington said something like quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it wasn't necessarily a duck. And they were referring to how communications on the internet sounded. And I'm very grateful to the Federal Communications Commission for issuing the Pulver order on February 12th, 2004, because it cemented a moment in time, which I became a subject now in Washington. It was because of free world dial-up that I had standing to do so. There were a number of people involved in FWD that enabled that to be, and really it was a future thinking of the FCC that facilitated it. And for all these years, if you could imagine, growing up, if you know anyone who's ever used anything from WhatsApp or Skype or Telegram, or any internet-based communication system to talk to one or more people, for that matter, FaceTime, I'm sure any of your friends ever paid for that directly. And collectively, I just say you're welcome to everyone, because the passing of the Pulver order facilitated that. And if you can imagine the pandemic, when people were working from home, studying from home, staying from home, they had to pay every time they went on voice or video on their phones. It'd be a whole different experience, not only in the US, but in many places around the world. And so that's something that a lot of people just take for granted. They have no idea that there was a person behind that, but that's me. And that was just a thing that I did. And there's a life lesson about nothing is impossible, because if anyone were to actually have told me back in the day that it was impossible to go to Washington and effectively within about a year's time frame to have a law get not only be listened to but get passed, that would change the face of communications in America and many other places around the world, you say you're crazy, you can't do it, it's impossible. Turns out when you don't know you can't do something, everything becomes possible. And so that by itself has really helped shape the communications industry. And I mean, I've done a lot of other things around that, but because starting the Vine conferences were good. When I got involved, voice over IP was a hobbyist technology. I still remember being on a panel with the former CTO of a major phone company, who, in front of everyone, said, "Oh, we don't play with toys at our company." And two years later, he's at my conference, spending millions of dollars writing an order to a company that became a major vendor in the space. And it's like, yeah, whatever. And that's the way it goes. But in terms of opportunities, it's we're only bounded by our dreams and how we see things, and that's also our blind side. But we could do almost anything we allow ourselves to, and it's not the book logic that gets you there, right? I'm a very strong believer in intuition. I'm a very strong believer in hearing yourself, being aware. I mean, not being blinded by stuff, but really allowing your awareness to come through, not being afraid to explore. Three big words: fear, greed, and disruption. Now, you could hear each word individually and think I'm being negative: fear, greed, disruption. But when you put those words together, for me, it represents a tremendous change that is about to happen. And if you could find those right words and put them in that order, magic is in front of you. And so I'm seeing a very similar opportunity in that field today as I did back in 95, 96, 97. And
Huh.
these days, when I look at the state of communications, combine that with where I'm seeing things in the blockchain space, I think there's another change that's underway that people just don't see yet. I have the original Von conferences ran from 1997 to about 2008. Earlier this year, I took back Von. I call it Von Evolution. And at Von Evolution, I'm looking at not just voice over IP, but the intersection that deals with artificial intelligence, 6G, and blockchain, and there are things that we can now do that we couldn't even dream of in the past. And there's so many opportunities that are opening up for people, whether they're in the mobile world, whether in the broadband world, whether they're still stuck in the wireline world, and where it's again, it's ideas, it's opportunities, and most importantly, we're now at a time that people will be able to write their own communications. What does this mean? Well, when I grew up in New York in the 70s or 80s, there used to be phone numbers I can call for find literally there was a phone number to find out what time it was. There was a phone number to find out what the weather was like. There was a phone number to find out a horoscope or what a sports report was. There were all these different telephone numbers. And if you wanted to be in that business, you literally would have to spend millions and millions of dollars to buy hardware to co-locate at the phone company's location, and then apply to create these services. One of the biggest changes coming into 2024 is there are phone companies all over the world that are starting to open up APIs to allow software developers literally to create brand new services. So that
Huh.
if you're in college and you're saying, gee, wouldn't it be cool if this was possible? Soon it will be, where you could write some code and connect and create a new service that opens up maybe I don't know, maybe ChatGPT's or OpenAI's API, connects that to an API that only you know about, connects to a blockchain API, and does stuff that only you thought about. But it creates something meaningful and useful for you and your friends. And that's where these phone networks start to become redefined and where I think one of the futures of communications is going to go by bringing the power to the people and enabling a new generation of folks that don't even understand why phone companies exist, how they could become very powerful for them, where they could become a platform to be used in ways that even the folks who created those networks never saw it themselves. There's a lot of openness when it comes to opening up programmability. Um, and that also comes with opportunities to invest. It comes with opportunities to do, to explore, and just to make things great. And if you take an imagination, don't bind it with the word can't and no. Everything is doable, and it's just a matter of figuring out for yourself what fits for you. It's like people talk about startups and product market fit, and always looking to understand those customers. But you also have to understand what it is you want to do, and understand what platforms you want to use for yourself, and understand what do you want to pursue. And as you may know, innovation doesn't happen when everyone agrees to the same thing. There needs to be a disruptor in the room who's really driven, obsessed almost, to make a change. And it's that person that holds on to that fortitude to do something that affects change, usually positive change, because innovation happens. When I worked on Wall Street a couple of times, like this is like I don't know, 1994-ish. I had an idea for web-based email. This is before Hotmail came out. And I told my friends, by the way, I had this idea. These are people I worked with. I said, by the way, I was thinking about doing a startup to do web-based email. What do you think? And people thought it was a stupid idea. So I didn't do it. And then I was
Oh,
working with people that were doing mortgage brokering. I said, what if we do mortgage brokering online? What do you think of that? Oh, that's a stupid idea. And what I realized after a few months, I needed new friends because I was outsourcing my future to these people rather than taking the direction as doing it myself. It's sort of like me driving into a town that I don't know about and asking a stranger for directions. Why should I trust that person that person's going to tell me where to go? I mean, I'm my own GPS too, but why would I outsource my future to someone who has no vested interest in me? So, I learned to be on my own and and not every idea is ready for now. Sometimes my ideas are 7, 10 years into the future, but I would strongly encourage people to figure out what they want to do and do it. And if they could find an alignment with others that share a common passion, to just go for it because change happens when no one expects it. And when you have no market share and you want to do something different, you are the disruptor. People cannot ignore you no matter what you think. And so when you have absolute confidence in something, magic will happen. You just have to believe in yourself and allow yourself the power to be that change. And when you do that, it's a fairly fun ride.
hmm. Yeah, a lot of good information. I mean, where does Jeff, where does your idea for like Vonage come about? Like this purple minute idea, like you can kind of sell these
Well,
spaces to like,
Purple Minutes came out of my frustration with the nascent industry because, back in the day, people started using IP for replacement. The old way of using minutes were called TDM minutes, time division multiplexing minutes, but we'll call them black and white minutes. These are like if we're in the minutes business right now and you have new equipment and you're using the new equipment to do the same thing the old equipment did, I call that black and white. Purple minutes was okay, you have an IP-based network. Why don't you do something creative? Why don't you do something you never could do before? That would be purple minutes. But no, most of my friends at the day, to their credit, they used the new technology to do old things because they're not that creative. They were just looking to do it as a replacement. And so purple minutes came out as my alliteration for showcasing what was couldn't be done before. But a lot of the apps you now see on your phone, the way that people are doing messaging apps, the way that a lot of dating apps work, a lot of that all represent purple because that was not doable in the past. People ultimately, over the last 20 years, became incredibly creative. They were not that creative 20 years ago, I'll tell you that. And in
huh,
terms of Vonage, so in 1998, when the entrepreneurs first came into the voice over IP market, a lot of people were putting computers in different key locations, and they were bypassing international tariffs by using the internet to go, let's say, from Santo Domingo to Tokyo. But they had a local hop off in Santo Domingo, a local hop off in Tokyo, and they would then come to my conference with these maps of where they had equipment, and they were meeting each other and doing a lot of they were building their networks manually. And I had this idea for something called the Minutes Exchange, or something I called MinX, where I set up a spreadsheet effectively, and then a trading system, the same way that bonds traded. I created a spot market for voice over IP minutes, and people were trading it very slowly, but that's what they were doing, and they were showing up at my conferences, and then we were automating it, and then in the year 2000, a friend of mine introduced me to Jeff Citron, who was really interested in minutes brokering, and so he became CEO of the company. And while he was incubating the Minutes Exchange at my office in Long Island, um, he overheard a conversation that I had, and I ultimately spoke to him about the next company I wanted to do was a broadband phone company, and he kind of beat me to the punch because when their office space was finally ready in Edison, New Jersey, they had a hard think and they decided to shift the business from being a minutes brokerage to become Vonage. And so the etymology of Vonage is the age of voice on the net. And so Minix is the original corporate entity that got renamed Vonage, and Vonage is the company that ultimately got acquired by Ericsson in November 2021 for over $6 billion. But that's another story for another day. But in terms of the ideas for it, it was fairly clear when free world dial-up in 2000, in the year 2002, when I was demonstrating free world dial-up on broadband, it was phenomenal. You could hear you had the ability to hear pin drop quality. The equipment we were using on the endpoints were really, really good, and compared to conventional telephony, there was nothing like it. And it was very addictive. It's like when you're talking to someone on the other side of the world and they sound so good and so close with no delay. It's wow. And so it became obvious that the next thing to do was Vonage. And so I'm really appreciative to what Jeff Citron did with his team and his leadership and all the CEOs that followed running the business because right, Vonage is now part of Ericsson, and these days they're now challenging and changing the way enterprises communicate, and it's nice to know that I'm connected to that. I also, if any of your friends play Fortnite, a company that I also started is called Vivox. Vivox is a voice engine in a lot of massive multiplayer online games, including Fortnite. We started off also in a different industry, and we pivoted into becoming a strategic partner with Sony Online Entertainment and EA Software. And Fortnite's one of, at least back then, we added voice to Second Life. We were the original voice engine to Second Life, and we were the original voice engine in Fortnite. So there's a lot of stuff that's happened. But what you learn over time is that some of the best gifts you can give someone is by believing in them. And I'd like to believe that in all the times I've had the opportunity to invest in startups, I always invested in teams that I believed in with visions which I can connect to, and usually help direct or at least have some influence on. And so it's nice to work with people that are positive disruptors.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's interesting how you've kind of identified different niches with different businesses, like this phone, the phone kind of niche for it, and then for the technology. Then you also looked at the game niche. Like, how do you kind of ideate, like, come up with your ideas? Is it just, hey, I have this need, and let's just solve it with something, or is there more like is there a process behind it?
It's situational. In the case of Vivox, it was almost silly. This is a company that raised like $6 million because we were going to be the site that added voice services to love and romance sites. This is back in 2000 and I don't know, 4 or 5. And then
That's so
after we
funny.
raised the money, none of the sites that said we wanted that they wanted our services were willing to pay for them. But luckily, our chief marketing officer is a major gamer, and so he led the change and the pivot of the company from doing love and romance sites to doing gaming sites. And over a couple of year period of time, we became one of the leading platforms for massive multiplayer online games. But in terms of how do you pick it, it's intuition, it's premonitions, it's allowing yourself to see the future and not fight with yourself, and to understand that there's some people you'll meet on your journey that will be helpful, and you have to learn to trust people and learn to be who you are, not who other people think you are.
Yeah, just I think the last question that I have. Um, so you kind of you rallied and really changed this, put this like new law in place essentially. I mean, do you think there's a lot more that needs to that needs to be done in terms of enabling internet communication services to be free, et cetera? Do you think that blockchain is going to kind of play a role in that? Like, what are some next steps for voice over IP?
It's not so much about free. I mean, look, I think we all have internet freedoms. Former chairman of the FCC, Michael Powell, was very clear about his take on internet freedoms, and each country has their own freedoms. But for the last, almost 20 years, February 12th, 2024 will be the 20th anniversary of the Pulver Order. I like to think that at least we've had a 20-year window of time of free communications. But whether it's free or it's pay, we do have to watch out for people who are bad actors. But the one of the biggest challenges we have in life, let alone communications, is trust. The reality
Hmm.
is that you probably don't answer your phone very often. That if you do answer your phone, it's specifically because you're not using your telephone, but someone's messaging you on a different application, or you're waiting for a doctor, or there's a specific person calling your number because you have to confirm something. But that's not the way life used to be. It used to be that we trusted the person who originated the call, so we'd actually pick up the damn phone. And so where blockchain comes in is the ability for two people who don't know each other to have mutual trust, that two untrusted parties. But again, that's the way phone calls used to be. But unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors. There's lots of bad things happening with phones, and long conversation another time perhaps. So one of the things we need to do is find a way to bring trust back into our lives, at least so that communication systems can function. And that's where blockchain-based communications can be very helpful because we at least can understand that a telephone number coming in very well could be a real number, not a spoof number, and that the person calling you or originating call to you understands. I mean, it'd be really nice if every time you have an incoming call, you actually can visually see the intention and purpose why that call is coming in. Oh, it's a doctor's office looking to confirm your appointment for 2 days from now. Please pick up the phone. That'd be a nice message to get, as opposed to someone who's just spamming you or someone who's just stalking you. And in terms of what's needed, there's a lot that's needed because the more technologies we have, the more we need to protect ourselves. There is an innocence, and then of course there's just people who just do bad things. And I'm someone who believes in light. I'm someone who believes that goodness will win over stuff, but we have to be protected, not disrupted, and there are good things still to happen. And the way we communicate is going to continue to evolve, continue to change. I think you could look for really cool advances with AI. I think AI voice is really cool. AI is now being used, by the way, to help find some of those so-called bad actors. But at the same time, AI is also being used to do some really bad, gnarly things. So it's be aware. Don't be taken for granted. But these are interesting times. The last 20 years have been fascinating. I think the next 20 years in front of us will challenge even the science fiction writers as far as where we can go.
Well, look, Jeff, I appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's, you have an incredible story, and you really kind of spearheaded a movement from internal strength, and just kind of was passionate about it and really changed the world with that. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing with your story and what you will hope to do next too.
Well, I'm grateful to be here. And just remember, you don't necessarily have to be educated in a subject to change the subject area. You just need that passion and that obsession to do that. So, Ben, thank you so much for having me as a guest. I'm grateful for it.